Hey, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a PC inside of the Montech Air 900 ARGB White case. It also comes in black, and I'll go ahead and link down below in the description and pin comment both the white and the black case so you guys can check it out. But come over here real quick. Let me show you everything that's going inside of the system. All right, so again, we have the Montech Air 900 ARGB White case. Then we're going to be using the EVGA Z390 Dark Motherboard, as well as the Intel Core i9-9900K processor. The processor is going to be cooled by the Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 360 liquid cooling unit. It's going to be utilizing the EVGA Supernova 1000G Plus power supply, as well as the EVGA RTX 2080 XC Ultra gaming video card, 32 gigs of Patriot Viper RGB RAM, a Kingston A1000 NVMe 480 gig SSD, along with a 1 terabyte WD Black SN750 M.2 SSD, a 500 gig WD Blue SSD, and a 512 gig Ion Key SSD. So let's get started. Now, before you start your build, make sure you choose your spot where you're going to stay the entire time you're building this machine. And for example, on the Montech case, go ahead and ground yourself. Discharge all of the ESD in your body on the metal parts of the case. That way you don't zap any of your expensive components. If you have a wrist strap that you can attach to the case or to a power supply or an ankle strap, definitely keep yourself grounded the entire time. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do after we've grounded ourselves is we're going to want to install the CPU. Again, in this case, the Core i9-9900K processor into the CPU socket. So after you've taken off the cover, be careful not to touch any of these pins. If you damage any of these pins, the motherboard manufacturer will not take the motherboard back, so be very careful. Okay, so what we're going to want to do first is push this little arm down. This locks this entire tray into place. You're going to want to push it down, pull it out a little tiny bit, and then lift it. That's going to go ahead and release the tray so that you can take that off there and lift it up. Okay, so then on the CPU itself, you're going to notice there's a little groove right over here, a little notch, and a little notch right over here. You're also going to notice on the CPU socket, there's a notch right here and a notch right over here. You're going to want to match up the notches here and the gold pin right up here to these two notches and just drop that into place and wiggle it around a little tiny bit just to make sure it's in place. Then you're going to want to push this down. And then you're going to want to make sure these two little lips go underneath this little bolt right here, and then push down on the arm, and then push out, push down, and slide it back under this retention mechanism right over here. So you've just installed a CPU. So coming out a little bit, we're going to go ahead and install the 32 gigs of Patriot Viper RAM. Okay, so we'll just turn the motherboard around and we'll focus right here. Okay, so your motherboard might look a little bit different from this. EVGA has put the RAM on the top of the motherboard, whereas most have it right along here, along the side of the CPU socket. Okay, so first thing we're going to want to do is open up these two little retention mechanisms over here. And now we're going to go ahead and grab the RAM. Make sure not to touch these gold contacts along the bottom. The grease from your fingertips might prevent the memory connectors down here from making proper contact, could cause a bunch of different issues. So then we're going to grab the RAM, and I'm going to do it incorrectly the first time just so that you see how it's done. But we're going to go ahead and slide it in. But you notice we slid it in and the memory seesawing over here. That's because we need to match the notch right over here with the notch right over here on the DIMM slot itself. So simply turn the RAM around. Now we're going to go ahead, I'm going to put it on the first slot. That way I can show you how to do it on the second. We're going to slide it in to right over here and right over here. slide the RAM in right over here and simply push down lightly, and you're gonna notice this little latch and this little latch just snap upwards, and it's going to lock right over here on the memory, keeping the memory down secure. Okay, pretty simple. You don't have to push down incredibly hard. And then turn the RAM around, the other stick, line it up, and just simply drop it in place. And we've installed 32 gigs of RAM. So let's move on to the M.2 SSDs. All right, now to install the M.2 SSDs, we're going to start off with the Western Digital 1TB black SM750. You're going to notice there's going to be a little notch right over here, and there's going to be a little notch right over here on the M.2 socket. Okay, so then at a 45-degree angle, we're going to kind of drop it right in here, and then just lightly push it in. Okay, it's gonna kind of fit like a cartridge maybe. Then we're going to grab the M.2 screw, push it down lightly over here, and just screw this in place. You don't need a lot of pressure, and it is that simple. So then we'll just go ahead and grab a second, the A1000 drive from Kingston, and we'll do the same. We'll just slide it right into that slot at a 45-degree angle. Push it in a little bit, then we'll push it down, screw that screw in, and then we're good. So we've just installed two M.2 SSDs. Let's move on to installing the liquid cooling unit. Now we're gonna go ahead and just flip the motherboard around. Just put it down lightly. We're going to notice on the back of the board, there's going to be 4 little holes right along here. That's where we're going to go ahead and set up the back plate. You'll notice right on the back plate over here, there's a notch opening up for the notch right over here, or the screw right over here. So just matching up all the screw holes we see back here with the holes down here and the little notch. We're just gonna kind of put this into place and lightly push them all through the holes. Now we're gonna go ahead and flip the motherboard, but keep your hands on this for now. That way when you slide it on its back, the plate doesn't fall off. Okay, so you'll notice right over here, we're starting to see the threading for that back plate sticking through. So then we're gonna go ahead and grab these little screws for the Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 and just screw them into place in all 4 of those screw holes. And we're going to do that again in all 4 of those screw holes. Okay, now that we have that in place, we're going to go ahead and apply the thermal paste. We're going to be using the Arctic MX4 thermal compound. So then everybody has a different method of applying it. The way I like to do it, and I've been doing it forever as a product development engineer, is we're just going to, right in the center, going to go ahead and squeeze about a grain of rice, maybe a little bit bigger, of thermal paste right in the center. Then we're going to go ahead and pull that nozzle out and just put the cap back on. That way we don't lose any thermal paste. Now we're going to go ahead and put the liquid cooling unit right next to the socket, and then we're just going to go ahead and put this into place right over here. Now it's going to be different on your motherboard because of the way that Arctic made this little fan, which is pretty awesome. It helps to cool down the VRMs, but because EVGA has this big heatsink right over here, kind of gets in the way. So the best way I found to put it is with that fan facing the top of the memory. And we just drop all 4 into those screw holes right over here, as well as the other side. And then we'll use these little guys to hold it down. Now, we're not going to be screwing it down at first with all of our might. Right now, it's just to hold it in place. And then on top of that, we're gonna want to put it in a diagonal pattern. So one over here, one on this corner, then one on this corner, and then one on this corner. That way we make sure the thermal paste is spread properly. Okay, and now with that in, now you've screwed it down with your fingertips on all four sides. Now we're going to go ahead with our screwdriver and we'll just tighten all four of those screws again in the same pattern, the diagonal pattern. And then now we're going to go ahead and connect the liquid cooling unit to CPU fan number 1, which on this particular motherboard is this fan header right over here. There's 2 fan headers. Okay, so we'll just turn this way. That way it can face this little piece of plastic over here and just slide it in there. And now we're ready to go ahead and install the motherboard into the case. Okay, and since we're going to be using a liquid cooling unit right up here in the front, I'm going to go ahead and remove this fan. I'll either put it up here or maybe use some other fans that I have for this case. So to do that, just going to go ahead and lift the case up a little bit, get our hands underneath here and just pull on the case like that. Okay, it's going to go ahead and open this up for you. And then here, you can also, if you don't want to remove the filter, you can remove it temporarily because we will have to remove this fan, or you can just remove the filter altogether. And we'll just go ahead and unscrew that here. All right, now we're going to go ahead and lay the case down on its side. Right, so now we're just going to go ahead and slide in the IO shield. You'll notice on the IO shield, there's these little dots right over here. Now, this is what retains the IO shield right in place. You're going to push those little dots over these little metal frame here. And we just slide it in here, kind of just push it through very lightly. All right, easy enough. Now let's slide the motherboard in place. All right, now we're just going to go ahead and drop the liquid cooling unit right into its hole right over here. And I'll go over that in a little bit more detail in a second. And then we're going to go ahead and drop the motherboard in place, not only matching the screw holes, but matching the IO shield. All right, like we've done perfectly there. And now that we're like this, just make sure that the screw holes line up perfectly. And then just go ahead and start screwing in the screws, not 100%, but just enough so that the board stays in place. Now, if you remember, this was the screw hole that we didn't have a standoff for. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that one for now, or skip that one period. All right, now this being the last one, we know they're all in place. So just go ahead and tighten them all up. All right, now let's go take care of this radiator right up here. All right, so now we have the motherboard in place, we have the liquid cooling in place, but we're going to have to take out the liquid cooling just for right now so that we can connect these cables to the fan. If not, or to the fans, I should say. If not, it's going to be near impossible to get in. So just taking this out for right now. Going to connect the very first fan. And then remember, this is going to be having air coming through the front of the case, then out through the back of the fan, through the radiator itself. So we're going to want to face it with the blades on this side. So just like this, and the back facing inwards, and have this just like this so that it's going to come in just like this on the case. And then we'll go ahead and attach these fans now, since it does come nicely in a chain off of this one fan that's controlled off of the motherboard header for the CPU. You see, I'm just connecting it right here. okay? And now that that's in there, we're gonna go ahead and grab the radiator and drop it back into the case like we had before. And then you can see that right through here on the hole down here. And now we have the fans all in place so that we can more easily install the fans. I'm gonna bring you down here so that we can start with the very first fan, which will be this guy right here. And just remember, this is the back, this is the front. And kind of just pop it into place. Then we'll drop the next one in, again, with this piece facing out. And then the next one in place. Same thing with that piece sticking out, okay? And now they're all in place. Now comes the fun part. We have to, through the case, we have to match up all the screw holes. Okay, and it's going to go on this line right here, 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 and here, not on any other of the screw holes. That's only in the liquid freezer too. Yours might be different. Just push this in by hand, and then we'll go ahead. It's gonna be hard to do it on film, but then we'll match it up with the screw holes on the radiator itself. Might be easier to do it from this side. That way we can see it at least on this bottom hole. So now we have one, and that one is going to make our lives so much easier. And like before, we're not going to screw it in all the way just yet. Just enough so that we can move it around if we needed to. And like you see, we do need to. We just need to make sure we get all these holes perfectly. All right, so now we have the pilot holes for all of them screwed in, and now we could raise it or lower it as we'd like. I'm gonna go ahead and maybe raise it a little bit more, but we have to remember, we have to fit some cables through here. I took the front panel out, so we gotta fit those front panel cables through there again. So I'm only gonna raise it a little tiny bit. All right, now with that screwed in, we can just go ahead and put back the filter. If we wanted to, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there because it is part of the case and I'm doing a review of the case itself. Now let me go ahead and put the front panel back on. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead, slide the USB 3 through here. This is where it originally came from. And slide the other cables, the I/O, the SATA power, and all that good stuff right through the top up here. And then we're gonna go ahead and then feed the excess cables through up here. But I just want to get the front panel on real quick. All right, with all those cables through, you can just snap everything back together. And now we'll go ahead and push those cables that we fed in through the top right through here. As good as new, and we'll get through the cabling in the second portion of the video. For right now, this is all hardware. So now let's go ahead and put in the two SSDs in their trays here. Again, we have options to put them everywhere, but I think back here along the back of the case is going to look the nicest. So we just have to take this piece out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to screw in the SSDs right here, match up these holes, and then when we're done, we'll just put them back on here. So one sec, I'm gonna do it off camera and then come back to you guys. All right, so I've gone ahead and put all the SSDs on this tray. I've used the same screws that we used on the motherboard. So there's 17 of these screws in total. And then for the ones that you would put up here, for example, you would go ahead and use these screws here. Okay, and now let's just go ahead and put this back into place. Now the way I've done it is I've put it so that SATA power and SATA data are on the bottom. You can have it on the top if you'd like, but I think it would look better for cable management right over here. You have the ability to do it any which way you'd like. Okay, and now we're just going to go ahead and install the power supply. Okay, so in order to do that, we're just going to go ahead and slide with the fan facing down because there is a filter down here. We're going to slide the power supply right into place here. Now, I do recommend, of course, a modular power supply. That way, you know, you have less cables cluttered through your system. And on top of that, if you did have that cage in its spot, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get cables in and out. So I do recommend just kind of survey your system, see what kind of cables you're going to need and how many of them, and go ahead and connect them ahead of time. Okay, so now with the power supply down there, we're going to go ahead and use the 4 power supply screws that they've included, these guys right here, and just line it up here as best you can. Line up all 4 of these screw holes right here, 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 and here. And like we've done before, don't screw them in all the way at first. All right, and now that all 4 are in there, now we'll just go ahead and tighten them all up. All right, and now we've got the power supply installed. Now, even though we don't have the video card plugged in or any additional card because I don't have additional cards to plug in, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the cabling portion. The reason we're gonna move on to the cabling portion is once we install that card, we're gonna have to play around with the SATA cables, move them around a little bit, and the PCIe cables just to get everything properly in there. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Anything I could have done differently, do you think, in your opinion, that might have helped me to install this a little bit better? We did have a few headaches, but regardless of that, everything's in there now perfectly, giving us plenty of room for cabling.